Lisa wiped her hands on her apron and sighed. Another long shift at the diner. It wasn't that she hated her job, but it could be exhausting. Taking orders, dealing with impatient customers, and keeping up with the fast-paced environment had become second nature to her. She had been working at the diner for over a year. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the bills. She had learned how to be quick, efficient, and most importantly, how to deal with all kinds of customers. Some were polite, some were rude, and some just took forever to order. Lisa had little patience for those who wasted her time. She was friendly when she needed to be. She knew how to flash a smile, how to make light conversation, and how to keep things moving. But deep down, she was always in a rush. The sooner a table finished, the sooner she could move on to the next one. Most of the regulars knew her well. They liked her sharp humor and her no-nonsense attitude. Some even tipped her extra for it. She wasn't a bad person, just a little impatient. In a place like this, speed mattered. It was just another normal day when the bell above the door jingled. Lisa didn't even look up at first. More customers, more orders, same routine. But when she finally glanced at the entrance, she noticed an elderly man stepping inside. He moved slowly, his steps careful. He looked around, as if searching for something. Lisa sighed again. She had a feeling this was going to take longer than she'd like. The bell jingled softly as the door shut behind him. The elderly man stood near the entrance for a moment, scanning the room. His clothes were simple, an old brown jacket, slightly wrinkled slacks, and shoes that had seen better days. He didn't look homeless, but he didn't look well off either. Lisa watched as he took slow, deliberate steps toward a booth near the window. He moved carefully, as if every step required effort. The lunch rush had passed, so the diner was quieter now. A few regulars sat at their usual spots, chatting over half-empty coffee cups. The old man finally reached the booth and lowered himself onto the seat. His movements were stiff, like his joints didn't bend the way they used to. He let out a small sigh and placed his hands on the table. His fingers were thin, slightly shaky. Lisa grabbed her notepad and walked over. She had seen plenty of elderly customers before, but something about this man felt different. He wasn't just here for a meal. There was something else in his eyes, a quiet sort of nostalgia. Still, she had a job to do. She put on her usual polite but hurried smile. "Good afternoon," she said, pen ready. "What can I get you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around again, almost like he was lost in thought. His gaze lingered on the counter, then the old jukebox in the corner. Lisa's patience was already wearing thin. She had other things to do. She shifted her weight and tapped her notepad lightly. "Sure?" She tried again. The old man finally looked up, as if he had just realized she was there. His eyes were kind but distant. "Oh," he said softly. "I'm sorry, dear. Give me just a moment." Lisa forced a small smile but sighed inwardly. This was going to take a while. Lisa stood by the table, tapping her pen against her notepad. The old man was still staring at the menu, his eyes moving slowly over the words. She glanced at the clock. It had already been a minute, maybe more. Most customers knew what they wanted in seconds. Regulars barely needed menus at all. But this man was taking his time, as if he had all the time in the world. She cleared her throat. "Do you need any recommendations?" The old man lifted his head slightly and smiled. No, just deciding." Lisa forced another polite smile, though her patience was thinning. The diner wasn't packed, but she still had other tables to check on. Finally, the man placed the menu down and folded his hands together. "I'll have a cup of coffee and a sandwich, please." Lisa scribbled down the order. "What kind of sandwich?" The old man chuckled lightly. "Surprise me." Lisa raised an eyebrow. Customers rarely said that. Most people had specific preferences: no pickles, extra cheese, toasted bread. This man seemed completely unconcerned. "All right," she said, turning on her heel. "I'll be back with your order." As she walked toward the kitchen, she couldn't help but shake her head. He seemed like a nice enough guy, but something about him was unusual. He wasn't like the regulars. He wasn't like the tourists either. She glanced back at his table. He was looking around again, almost like he was remembering something. His fingers traced the edge of the table absent-mindedly, a small smile playing on his lips. Lisa shrugged it off and pushed through the kitchen doors. It wasn't her job to figure people out. She just had to bring the food, take the payment, and move on to the next customer. Lisa moved quickly, grabbing a plate and pouring a fresh cup of coffee. She decided on a simple turkey and cheese sandwich. Nothing fancy, but good enough. She set everything on a tray and carried it over to the old man's table. "Here you go," she said, placing the coffee and sandwich in front of him. The old man smiled warmly. "Thank you, dear." Lisa gave a small nod and turned to leave, but then she noticed something. The man was slowly reaching into his jacket pocket. His hands were a little shaky as he pulled out an old, worn leather wallet. She stood nearby, pretending to check her notepad, but she was watching him. He flipped the wallet open and started sifting through the bills. The money inside was crumpled, the edges soft from years of use. He carefully counted a few small bills and some loose change, setting them on the table one by one. Lisa couldn't help it. She let out a short, quiet chuckle. The old man looked up. "Something funny?" Lisa quickly shook her head, but she was still smiling. "Oh no, it's nothing. Just..." She hesitated, then shrugged. "Times are tough, huh?" She meant it as a light-hearted comment, not meant to offend, but as soon as she said it, she realized how it might have sounded. The man didn't frown. He didn't get upset. Instead, he just studied her for a moment, his expression calm. Then he smiled again, just a small, knowing smile. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly. Lisa blinked. The way he said it sent an unexpected chill down her spine. She let out a small, nervous laugh. Should I?" The man didn't answer right away. He simply picked up his coffee cup and took a slow sip. Lisa suddenly felt a strange, uneasy feeling creeping over her. Something about this man was different. And she had a feeling she was about to find out why. Lisa stood still, waiting for the old man to explain himself. But he didn't. He just sat there, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. For some reason, the air in the diner felt different. Quieter. Lisa glanced around and noticed a few regulars looking in their direction. Some had paused their conversations. Others exchanged glances, as if they recognized something she didn't. Her stomach tightened slightly. Was she missing something? She cleared her throat. Should I know who you are?" The old man smiled again, but this time there was something behind it. Something unreadable. He set his coffee cup down and folded his hands on the table. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose that depends on how long you've been in this town." Lisa frowned. "A while." The old man nodded. "Then maybe you've heard a story or two." Before Lisa could say anything, a voice came from behind her. "No way." She turned and saw one of the older customers staring at the old man, eyes wide. Another diner regular, a man in his 60s, leaned forward in his booth. "Is that really you?" the man asked. Lisa felt completely out of the loop now. She looked back at the elderly man, searching his face for some kind of answer. He just chuckled softly. "It's been a long time." Lisa's heart started beating faster. Who was this man? And why did it suddenly feel like the entire room knew something she didn't? Before she could ask, she heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming from the kitchen. Then, the diner owner appeared. The moment his eyes landed on the old man, his expression changed completely. Lisa had never seen him look so shocked. The diner owner, Mr. Harris, froze in place. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared at the old man like he was seeing a ghost. Then, he rushed forward. "Sir, is that really you?" His voice was filled with disbelief. The old man smiled, nodding slightly. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" Lisa looked between them, completely lost. Mr. Harris, normally a calm, no-nonsense type, suddenly seemed overwhelmed. He wiped his hands on his apron, almost like he didn't know what to do. I can't believe it," Mr. Harris stammered. "I thought you'd left for good." The room had fallen almost completely silent. Customers whispered among themselves, exchanging knowing glances. Lisa felt like the only one who didn't understand what was happening. She folded her arms. "Okay, can someone tell me what's going on?" Mr. Harris turned to her, shaking his head in amazement. "Lisa, do you know who this is?" She let out a short laugh. "I'm guessing I don't." Mr. Harris took a deep breath. "This man is Richard Evans." Lisa blinked. The name didn't ring a bell. "And?" One of the older customers at the counter scoffed. "And he's the reason this diner even exists." Lisa frowned. "What?" Mr. Harris nodded. "Decades ago, Mr. Evans was one of the most successful businessmen in town. He didn't just run businesses, he helped build this place. He donated money to small shops, funded local schools, even helped struggling families. He gestured around the diner. This very restaurant, it wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. Lisa stared at the old man, her face growing warm. The same man she had chuckled at just minutes ago. He didn't look rich, he didn't act important. But everyone in the room clearly knew and respected him. Her stomach twisted with guilt. She had judged him without knowing anything about him. Richard Evans just smiled at her as if he could see exactly what she was thinking. Lisa felt her face heat up. She glanced at the old man again, this time with different eyes. He wasn't just some slow, forgetful customer. He was someone important, someone who had shaped the very town she lived in. Her throat felt dry. "I didn't know," she muttered. Mr. Harris shook his head, still in awe. "Most young folks wouldn't. Mr. Evans stepped away from the public eye years ago." He turned back to the old man. "Where have you been all this time?" Richard Evans chuckled softly. "Oh, just living life. Traveling a bit. I never needed recognition. I just wanted to help." Lisa swallowed hard. The way she had treated him, her impatience, her little chuckle, felt 10 times worse now. One of the older customers at the counter spoke up. "I remember when he paid off my father's medical bills. Saved our family." Another nodded. "He gave my husband a loan to start his shop. Didn't ask for anything in return." Lisa listened as person after person shared a story about Mr. Evans' kindness. Every word made her guilt sink deeper. She had misjudged him so badly. Slowly she turned back to him. "I'm really sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to." Richard Evans raised a hand, stopping her. His smile was warm, forgiving. "No need for all that, dear. We all make mistakes." Lisa felt a lump in her throat. He wasn't angry. He wasn't holding it against her. He was just kind. And now she understood why the entire diner had gone quiet when he spoke. Lisa shifted on her feet, feeling smaller than ever. She had misjudged this man from the moment he walked in. She had assumed he was just another slow customer, someone holding up her shift. Now she realized he was someone who had shaped the very town she lived in. She took a deep breath. "Let me at least cover your meal," she blurted out. Mr. Evans chuckled. "That's kind of you, dear, but I can pay for my own lunch." Lisa hesitated, then gave a small smile. "I insist." Mr. Harris clapped a hand on Lisa's shoulder. "She's right, Mr. Evans. This one's on the house." The old man shook his head with amusement, but didn't argue. He took another sip of his coffee, then looked around the diner. "This place still feels the same," he murmured. "I'm glad it's still here." A few of the older customers nodded in agreement. Some even raised their coffee cups in a quiet tribute. Lisa stood there, watching the way the entire room seemed to respect him. She had never seen anything like it. It wasn't just about money or success. It was about the way he had treated people. He had given without expecting anything in return. She suddenly felt foolish for the way she had rushed through her job, treating customers as nothing more than orders to fill. How many people had she overlooked? How many had stories she never bothered to hear? As Mr. Evans finished his coffee, he stood up and stretched. "Well," he said with a grin, "I suppose I should be on my way." Lisa smiled back. "Thank you for coming in today." Mr. Evans winked. "Oh, I'll be back. Can't stay away from a good diner." Lisa watched as he walked toward the door, moving just as slowly as when he arrived, but this time she didn't feel impatient. She felt grateful.